Okay, we'd like to welcome everyone to the Working Class Power Hour podcast. This is episode 3. I'm joined by Eric Basir, ATU Local 308 Executive Board Member in Chicago Transit Authority. My name is John Ferretti, former Local 100 Executive Board Member and one of the co-founders of the Local 100 Fight Back Coalition. We'd like to welcome everybody to the podcast. We know it's been a little while due to the oppressive events in Chicago. We weren't able to live stream last week, and Eric had lost his voice for a little bit, so he's been out in the field a lot in his duties as an executive board member. Unlike here in New York, they actually get some release time to do union work, which would be shocking for most members of Local 100, because the only people who get release time out here who are ass kissers of the president or the current administration. They basically bribe them to get their vote on various issues within the executive board with release time. So Eric, just wanted to give the floor to you so you can, say hello and everything, and then we're going to get to the topics that we're going to discuss today.
Yeah, thanks, John. We we are slowly trying to make our way with this podcast. There are some technical difficulties, so everybody, thanks for bearing with us. We want to make sure that you feel welcome. So please, we have comments. We have you can contact me or John as well directly, and love for you to participate. We just try to come up with topics that we think might be relevant to the purpose of this podcast. But what really makes it successful is your participation as a worker, no matter what city you're in and what your craft or the employer you have.
Yeah. It's important that we have some commentary from rank and file members in both unions and from many other unions. Recently, we've been reaching out to people who are organizing for Palestine labor, labor for Palestine coalitions here in New York City, and there was recently a big protest this weekend. I know there was one in Washington as well as protests all over the world against the genocide in Gaza, and we just wanted to show a video to kind of frame the discussion on Palestine. This is a discussion we've been wanting to have for a while, but both within Local 100 Fight Back Coalition and within the podcast. But it's often, the press of events makes it impossible to cover it as much as it deserves to be covered. I've had some coworkers who've sent me negative feedback about my positions on Palestine, and basically want me to be silent about genocide. And if any of you know either one of us, Eric in Chicago, myself, that's the reason why genocide happens. Genocide is successful because good people say nothing. People who know better say nothing and stay silent. And you can't fight for democracy in a union if you're not for democracy when it comes to who lives and who dies. Life and death struggles, when it comes to imperialism, when it comes to the way in which the bosses internationally pit us against each other and divide and conquer us for control of natural resources, for control of geographic locations. None of those things are questions that the working class should be silent about. But I want to frame the discussion by talking about what's going on there. There's an interview that I want to share with Mehdi Hassan. I don't know if you guys know, but Mehdi Hassan is a long-time journalist in mainstream media that actually covers things that don't get covered by the mainstream media. And he was actually fired from MSNBC because of his coverage of Palestine. And the other Muslim anchors on MSNBC were greatly silenced and were sidelined during the heat of this genocidal occupation of Gaza. So Mehdi Hassan is speaking with Kyle Kulinski, who's one of the founders of the Justice Democrats, and Crystal Ball, who's a left-wing independent journalist. And they're talking about the Flower massacre what's being called the Flower Massacre, which is basically an incident where Israeli forces postured as if they were providing aid, food services, flour, basic supplies, basic staples. They brought in trucks, and they provided no security for them. And then when things got a little out of hand, the truck drivers ran over people, and there was gunfire broke out. And of course, the Israelis are saying Hamas was attacking the distribution of food, because that would definitely be something that somebody who represents people who are starving, and represents the government in that section of Palestine would definitely do. That's great. That's very likely that happened. In any case, the reports are overwhelming that it was Israeli sniper fire that killed over 100 people and injured many hundreds. So that's what they're talking about in this video. I just wanted to give it a little context. I'm going to share my screen and then play about 6 or 7 minutes of that video to kind of frame the discussion. So hold on just a second so I can get that up. Share screen. Okay, here we go.
I wanted to get your reaction to, with regards to what's being called the Flower Massacre this morning as Palestinians were mowed down while they're searching for food. This is how CNN reported this on Twitter. They said at least 100 killed and 700 injured in chaotic incident where IDF opened fire as people waited for food in Gaza, Palestinian officials say.
Yeah.
And I mean, you see this systematically. In fact, there's studies that show, this isn't just, us cherry picking, that when it's Israelis,
yes,
they're murdered, they're massacred, they're slaughtered.
He intercepted that study showing words like massacre, slaughter, and horrific.
And when it's Palestinians, they just mysteriously die. There's no,
language,
no assignment of blame, etc.
I saw a great tweet, Crystal, from someone the other day saying, "Find someone who looks at you the way the BBC looks at the passive voice when it comes to Gaza."
Yeah, right.
That's right.
Right. And Palestinian, kids can never be kids. They're
minors.
They're minors, or in the case of one Sky News report, I think it was a 3-year-old who was murdered. She was like a young lady.
Yeah.
You were inside the mainstream media ecosystem, as was I. Where does this come from? Is this like an edict from on high? Do you have like Mossad waiting in the wings to make sure that you're using this kind of language and you're only focusing on certain things that show Israel in a certain regard? Is it that people have been so propagandized that they actually, can't even see the way that their bias comes through in their reporting? Like, what do you attribute this to?
I think a lot of it is the last point which you mentioned, which is the way I try and place the Palestinian conflict is I try and give it a broader context, which is this doesn't just happen in Palestine. Palestine may be the most egregious case of censorship and dehumanization that we know of.
Yeah.
But it happens in other walks of life. And there's a reason why a lot of black activists from Ferguson and elsewhere linked up with people in Gaza and the West Bank years ago, is because when I see the Israeli military denying stuff and reports what you just said about officials say and chaotic scenes, doesn't it remind you of police statements after shootings?
Oh, yeah.
After shooting a black guy? It's like, well, he fled and people, it was chaos. And then later on, we investigated ourselves and we cleared ourselves. And later on, video emerges, you were lying. And I always tell reporters in America, look, just as in recent years, we've realized to show a little bit more skepticism when it comes to police statements and mass shoot of black men in traffic stops. Why don't we show that same skepticism when it comes to Israeli claims and Israeli military PR? And I think there is a dehumanization both of black men at traffic stops and Palestinians at checkpoints and Palestinians going about their daily lives. The dehumanization, Crystal, is at the core, I believe, of why this conflict continues the way it does, because Palestinian lives don't have the same value as Israeli lives. And people have said this for years. I've said this for years. Palestinians have said this for years. Never has it been more visible, more brazen than in this particular conflict. I mean, just look at the death toll. Even if you are the most pro-Israeli person there is, and you believe those 1,200 people on October 7th, those 766 civilians, those 36 kids need to be avenged. 30,000 dead we've just crossed today, and that's a conservative underestimate.
It is, I have the Euromed monitor numbers
way higher, and then under the rubble. 12.5, 13, 14,000 children. In what world do we live where we're saying 36 kids were killed by Hamas on October the 7th, but in retaliation, we're going to kill 12,500 children? I mean, just in sheer just math of the humanity. It's just, I've never seen anything like it. Not in my lifetime. The way we have simply just accepted this level of death and killing as a society. Not, you said liberal elites, and I agree with you on the actual polling. You're right. But let's just cast a net of blame a bit more widely. As a country and as a society, as a West, we're pretty indifferent to this stuff.
Kid Rock was on Joe Rogan the other day, and he was.
Those are two words. Those are two names. Those are two names that make you want to take some order.
Yeah, and he was saying just kill 30,000 or 40,000 of them at a time if they don't release the hostages, and just keep doing it.
Fuck around and find out. That was his logic.
And that can only stem from dehumanization.
Yeah.
Because he is incapable of thinking of himself as, what if I was a Palestinian child?
Exactly.
Because you can't get to that position unless you're unable to do that.
But also think about how dangerous the dehumanization is. Because if I go along with it, then why can't Hamas attack you again and kill loads of you? Like, I can't say to Hamas, you should not do this, it's immoral, which I do say. I do believe it's immoral to kill civilians, no matter how just your cause is. Certainly killing kids is unforgivable in any scenario. But how can you say that if you've now said that's the way of the world?
Yep.
And if we're going to play the you started it, well then Palestinians are going to say you started it, and we can play this game going all the way back to 1948 and beyond. So either you have some rules of war, and by the way, this is a really important point for Americans to acknowledge, is we have a quote-unquote rules-based order. It's inconsistent, it's selective, it's not very strong, but it's there. We have certain things that emerged over the years. So Israelis go on TV and say, what about Dresden? Yeah, and after Dresden, we came up with Geneva Conventions, and we did things at The Hague to Nazis, and we said, well, we maybe shouldn't have done Dresden. We are now throwing that all away. With Biden is complicit, and the British government, the American government, and the French government, they're complicit in saying now to any future offender, none of these rules exist anymore, because you said Israel could do whatever you want if you had a just cause. So any future country that says we've been wronged, we've been the victim of terrorist act, you can do whatever you want now, apparently.
Yeah.
And by the way, inconvenient fact, Hamas killed 45% civilian targets. Israel killed 92% civilian targets. So even if you do the apples-to-apples comparison, it doesn't come out looking good for the Israelis.
Yeah, and how many 9/11s are we at with regards to what's been done?
I mean,
to
for
the
me, what is
Palestinians?
entertaining is seeing Israeli officials compare themselves to Hamas. That's your benchmark. Even let's say the numbers you just gave, and I haven't seen those numbers. Let's say we reverse them. Even then, how is Hamas your benchmark?
Right.
How is Hezbollah? How is ISIS? How is any group you want to bring out? I thought you're the West only democracy in the Middle East. You're our Western ally, shared values. So then you don't get to make Hamas your benchmark. You get to make the ICJ your benchmark. Right. You get to make UN Security Council resolutions your benchmark. You get to make Human Rights Watch reports your benchmark.
Yeah. And I think you're right to point to, in a lot of ways, not that we've ever consistently followed the international rules-based order, but there's a reason why both Putin, in justifying his invasion of Ukraine, and Netanyahu, in justifying the all-out massacre of Gaza civilians, points to our actions in the war on terror and in Iraq. I mean, that really did start the unraveling and expose our hypocrisy.
Because we used to hide our hypocrisy. This is the point.
Yeah.
Like, as bad as previous American presidents were, we used to, until George W. Bush at least, and Iraq, we used to pretend. Right? When we went into Iraq in 1991, we were helping Kuwait. When we went into Panama, whatever, we're getting Noriega for drugs or whatever. We were not this brazen.
Yeah.
And people that, the brazen, I hear some on the left say, well, I prefer the brazenness, right? I prefer the person who tells you his enemy. Again, that's nice rhetoric, but the reality is, once we're in the jungle, we're all going to suffer, right?
Yeah.
And before there was some sense of, somebody gave a good example the other day. When Israel droned, Israel did a drone strike back in the 2000s in which either there was an American citizen nearby or in the car. I can't remember the details. But George W. Bush put out a statement criticizing Israel. That was too far. That was like one drone strike. Today, Biden can't put out a statement for 30,000 people dead, for attacks on hospitals, schools, cemeteries, churches, mosques. It's just mind-boggling how the Overton window has shifted on what a country can get away with because of Hamas, because of October 7th, which again, I'll say openly, horror. What happened on October 7th was a horror. Does not justify this to the slightest.
Yeah, no one here was an apologist for the atrocities on October 7th. That doesn't justify genocide, ethnic cleansing,
So,
barbarism.
are we not going to get more of those atrocities? I just don't understand how people can be this stupid.
That's it.
You're increasing recruitment for Hamas as we speak.
And that's the thing, is these people in the U.S. government know that.
They know that?
I mean, I think it was Tony Blinken who said there is no military solution for Hamas. What are we doing then? I mean, it's always been preposterous to say, oh, the surgical hunt for Hamas, as Adam Johnson always talks about. Oh, it's clear what they're actually trying to do, and it's annihilation. I mean, it's collective punishment, and it's annihilation, plain and simple, in front of everybody's eyes. Mehdi, I want to ask you about your big news this week, Zateo.
Okay, I'm going to stop the share there. And where am I? There we go. Okay, Eric. So, we just played that so that people who may not have been following what's been going on can get a kind of sense of the battle and why it's happening, and the role that our U.S. tax dollars are paying in funding and aiding and arming one of the worst genocides in this century, a genocide on the scale which could end up being on the scale of atrocities we've seen in the last century. Some people are describing Gaza right now as basically mirroring Mogadishu during the Somalian genocide. And aside from the number of people who have been killed, Kyle talked about 30,000 claimed dead Palestinian civilians in this conflict. That does not account for all the people buried under rubble that has not been cleared. That does not count all the people who have been tortured and humiliated and brutalized by Israeli forces during their occupation. And there are claims that hundreds of thousands, up to 500,000 people may die just from the side effects of this occupation, just from the concomitant disaster, completely man-made disaster that was created by the Israeli invasion, bombing, and occupation of Gaza. The mass expulsion of nearly 2 million people into basically from a concentration camp in Gaza to a much smaller concentration camp near Rafah at the Egyptian border. Sorry, my dog is freaking out right now. But Eric, I'm going to let you comment, and I'm going to take care of my doggy. Hold on, come here. Come here.
So
this is Chewy, by the way. This is my Yorkie, and he's losing his mind over here because he's not getting enough attention. Say hi, Chew. Say hi.
Hey, Chewy.
His name is Chewy for short.
There was some really interesting things said in this brief tape. And a phrase that Mehdi mentioned, just. And, when we're dealing with grievance and arbitration issues as, union reps, we know that the employer, when they punish, have to have just cause. What steps were taken to get to the degree of the punishment that they're meting out? And John just disconnected. He'll be back.
No, I'm right here.
Okay.
Yeah.
And just cause has various what they call tests, right? And is the punishment that's being meted out just to the crime? And they kept throwing out numbers: 36 children versus 10,000. 30,000 people versus 1,000. Does it make any of this right? No. And ironically, being that Israel is based on Hebrew law, which is based on even older law, such as the Code of Hammurabi. We have a principle called eye for an eye. there's always equality when you're meeting out justice. And they have gone way too far. That doesn't make anything we're saying anti-Jewish, anti-religious, but we're saying this is not just what's going on. And us in the labor unions, we make a big mistake when we don't condemn this kind of thing. Because I noticed in business unionism, where they say the most important relationship for the union officials is relationship with management. They justify when our employer exceeds these tests of just cause, when the employer does what's called accelerated discipline. You have a train operator, for example, running behind all the time, right? And here in Chicago, we got though, and we're going to get to that later. One person train out. Delays after delays, leaves the terminal, and as they start to depart, the train stops, goes into what's called moving emergency. These types of things are going on all the time because all day, all kinds of practice happen. The operator resets the train, resets the emergency circuit and proceeds, when really the rules are you got to get out and check. But they got to go the right way. We need to make schedule. We need to make schedule. They don't want to be stressed out. They want to get home. They know they're going to be late anyways, forced overtime. But we find out that there was a human being that was run over. And when we debate this, you'll hear the union people say, well, they killed somebody. The operator killed somebody. They killed somebody. I said, so the train operator wants to kill people. Is that what you're saying? So they justify then the employer firing this person. They weren't trying to kill anybody. But they want to make an example. Or accelerating the discipline to the highest level as opposed to going by the steps. No, we're not trying to kill. Stuff happens. But you can't justify excessive punishment. There's no justification for this war. There's no justification for collective punishment of union workers by employers. It's all related. We had the Vietnam War. We had the same type of disconnect. The business unions, a lot of AFL-CIO affiliated, wouldn't condemn the Vietnam War. And they got into the patriotism, right? And so what they did, the labor unions lost their connection to the younger generation. So now they're looking at the labor unions as part of the problem. And that war was wrong. Same with the other war. It's always the same thing over and over. Unions can't be real unions and be pro-war. That's all I'll say.
Yeah. I mean, just to return to the discussion, when you talk about who is being punished, I mean, we have to be clear. As Palestinian civilians had absolutely nothing to do with Hamas's brutal attack on October 7th.
Yes.
Nor did they have anything to do with previous acts of unwarranted and barbaric attacks on civilians. As much as Israeli civilians are complicit in the apartheid state that they live in, they benefit from that apartheid state. Attacking civilians is never a way to solve any of these problems, and it actually only creates, as we see, more and more death. But those who default to the position but Hamas about everything that Israel does, but Hamas is their way out. Is their way out of explaining that although they are horrified by the 36 children killed in the attack on October 7th, I forget, was it 63 or 36, I think? it was less than 100 children that were killed in the October 7th attack. They're horrified. And what about the children? But when it's 14,000 Palestinian children, we were defending ourselves. This is self-defense. Think about it in any circumstance in the world where you could claim self-defense because somebody wronged you and then you went about engaging in a mass shooter event. That's proportional. That's a proportional response. Not to mention the fact that all of this is predicated on the fact that all of Israel is stolen land, is colonial settler theft of other people's land, and the narrative that it was a land without a people for a people without a land is a gross and disgusting lie. And it is also a lie that Israel keeps Jewish people safe. Think about some of the comments of the Israeli government. Their governmental leader that was represents women said that we're proud of the fact that people will remember that the Jews did this. We're proud of that. We want them to know the Jews did this. Let me ask you a question. Does that make Jews safe anywhere in the world? Does that make them safe from anti-Semitism anywhere in the world? That Jews engage in genocide too? That Jews are not just victims of genocide, but the Jews are the perpetrators of genocide? Does that make Jews around the world safe? Does that solve white supremacy? Does it solve European racism that is the cause of all of this? This colonial settler project in Palestine was in large respect an anti-Semitic solution to the problem. It's let's take the Jews out of Europe. Let's take the Jews out of Europe and let's solve this problem by taking these people who we don't want, who we hate, who we scapegoat for everything that's wrong with our society. Let's take them somewhere else and use them as an outpost, as an imperialist outpost to oppress other people who we hate, i.e. Muslims. And this has been going on for a long time. And they want to make it seem like this is some religious conflict between, people who have deep-seated religious hatred and just can't live together. It's just impossible for Jews and Muslims and Christians and Druze and other ethnicities and religions to ever live together. And fundamentally what this is an anti-human ideology. It's basically a caricature of all of the religious and ethnic minorities in the world to basically say that they're all savages and they can't live together in peace and harmony, and that history proves that they've never lived in peace and harmony, and that is a lie. For nearly 1,000 years, Jews and Christians, Druze and other ethnic and religious minorities lived in relative peace, even under the Ottoman Empire, in that area of the world. And at the time that the State of Israel was founded, and even long before that, when the British Mandate encouraged Jewish immigration to Palestine, they were like 20% of the people in the territory at the time of the partition, the United Nations partition. They had like 6% of the land in terms of land ownership. And the United Nations gave them 55% of the country, of the land. And then they engaged in terrorism to steal another 30% of the land. And how did they do that? Mass expulsion. Anywhere else in the world where we see mass expulsion of ethnic majorities, minorities, we call that what it is. It's ethnic cleansing. Okay, it's terrorism. In terms of terrorism, the Israeli government, the future founders of the Israeli government, they bombed a hotel in Palestine that was the center location of the British forces because they were pissed at Britain for not going fast enough to give them all of Palestine, and for being otherwise distracted by World War II in terms of their focus on the Zionist project in Palestine. So they bombed and engaged in an act of terrorism against innocent civilians, some of them, and some military, British military forces. It was so when we talk about terrorism, nobody gives you that context, and I encourage people, please do your own research. When you hear the news media, that's part of what Mehdi Hassan was talking about. When you hear the news media talk about these things, and use all this passive language, they have an agenda. They are not good faith actors. They have a political perspective that they are trying to get across, and they want to drown out anything that undermines that narrative. And so we are being gaslit into believing all sorts of things that we wouldn't otherwise believe about Palestinian people based on a narrative that's funded with hundreds of millions of dollars. I mean, you see in a lot of these congressional races, now they're talking about AIPAC giving unlimited amounts of money to defeat the squad, to defeat those who stood up and called for a ceasefire, to punish them for telling the truth to their own constituents, and for standing against genocide. They want to arm other candidates to remove these people from the power to ever be able to make any change. So is this really about self-defense, or is this really about a scorched earth campaign to maintain the bounds of the expressible in American society? I thought we were a democracy. I thought they were the democracy in the Middle East. A democracy doesn't need to engage in scorched earth's fascistic tactics in order to suppress dissent and punish dissent. And that's what's going on here in the United States. I don't know if you guys seen recently, but there was a young woman, Middle Eastern woman who was protesting Joe Biden's speech in Arizona. I think it was Mesa, Arizona. And I wish I had the video up, but I don't. Unfortunately, I don't have the video to show, but we'll put it in the comments. And it shows how when she begins to speak out and call for Joe Biden to stand against genocide and to call for a ceasefire, she's physically assaulted by white liberals in that audience who think they can drag her around like a ragamuffin and implement their will upon her physically. There's something wrong with people who say they stand for freedom and democracy, these supposed liberals, who at the drop of a hat will physically assault someone if they don't agree with them. That's a cult. That's not any representation of democracy. They're not defending anybody by doing that. They are attacking anyone who disagrees with them. Sounds a lot like the Trumpsters. Sounds a lot like MAGA. And, MAGA is a cult, and a very dangerous cult, and a precursor of the kind of fascism that could destroy all that we've won and fought for over many decades. But everyone's in a bubble to a certain extent. And the white skin privilege of someone who could put their hands on a person of color and drag her around to shut her up because she's not saying what they want her to say is a real temperature check on the bankruptcy of this so-called democracy that we say we're part of. Eric, I want to open up the floor for further discussion, so go ahead.
Oh yeah, I agree. And unfortunately, because I use my phone, I can't switch to that video, to put it on.
I'm going to see if I can find it. But,
While
you're talking, okay?
I think, though, because of time, though, we want to make sure we start to go to the next topic, the conductors. Yeah, absolutely. I agree. And it's so important for everybody who is watching this to try to educate yourself about the history that John is talking about. Okay, because these little things that he talks about, these things like the hot empire, right? He's talking about all these little things. Have knowledge of this, because that gives you an understanding of how we got to where we're at. Don't just take what they put on the news, all right? Because even the people presenting the news, if they're well intentioned, you still got to do your own homework. So educate.
Okay, I'm just trying to find I was just trying to find the video. Um, yeah, I'm not going to be able to find the video that gives you a close view of it, so we're just going to move on to other topics.
Right. People will find it.
Yeah, I'll put
Jill Biden. Just look up
Joe Biden, Mesa, Arizona.
Protester over.
Yeah. So I'll put a link in the comments. So we're gonna switch to talking about the subway conductor who was slashed here in New York. There's a lot to talk about, but I want to try to frame the discussion by a little bit of the media coverage. It's a short, like couple of minute video. So let me just share my screen.
Thank you. Now on CBS 2 and streaming on CBS News New York, we start with that subway conductor who was slashed on the job at the Rockaway Avenue station. We've just learned he's been released from the hospital. CBS News' Jenna DeAngelis live where the attack happened. Jenna?
Chris, police say the conductor was sticking his head out of the train as he normally does and was slashed in the neck. We're told the suspect, who was wearing a blue vest, then ran off. Police responded to the Rockaway Avenue station around 4 a.m. The 59-year-old conductor was taken to Brookdale Hospital, where he received 34 stitches to the gaping wound. That's according to the Transport Workers Union. The union says the conductor, who has 24 years of service, was making routine observations from the cab window of an A train when he was slashed. According to the MTA, customers rushed to his aid, including a doctor who helped him until EMS arrived. The MTA says he's been treated and released from the hospital.
He's obviously shaken up, but he's a dedicated employee. His first words to me were, "I love my job," but I thought I was going to die. And so we have to give our conductors, we have to give our employees, our station agents, we have to give them the confidence that we support them and that we're going to keep them safe.
The MTA pointed out a pilot program it announced Monday. It installed these portable stanchions at the 125th Street station adjacent to the conductor's cabs to discourage customers from standing in the area. It's designed to enhance conductor safety, but the union is calling for more safety measures for its workers. It's actually holding a press conference across the street here as we speak. We'll be sure to have more updates for you on the news at 5. But for now, we are live in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn. Jenna DeAngelis, CBS 2 News.
Okay, so the reason why I shared that was to let me just get back to the cancel. Was it playing or no?
Yeah, I'm trying to mention the video.
Oh, the video.
But we heard it.
We heard the volume. Okay. The only reason why I played that is because some people outside of New York may not have heard what happened, and it's important for people to see some of the coverage. So, lots to say about that video. One, the MTA's asinine plan to put stanchions by the conductor's position to prevent customers from being able to get so close to the conductor. I mean, first of all, you can walk right through those stanchions and nothing's going to stop you from doing so. Secondly, they're not at the edge of the platform. They're past the yellow strip, which, doesn't prevent anybody from getting close to you. And how many millions of dollars were wasted on this ridiculous crackpot adventure so that somebody's retarded cousin can get a contract from the MTA? Somebody, some grifter can make a quick windfall paycheck off of our tax money with a non-solution like this. And it also shows you the cluelessness of MTA management and how much they think we're stupid. How much they think that, we'll just throw out some ridiculous idea, make a show that we care, and then go back to business as usual. And the business as usual is unsafe operation throughout the system on a regular that is directed by MTA management because they want to squeeze more and more productivity out of less and less workers. They want to run the system on massive amounts of overtime. And they consistently and deliberately put a target on our backs all the time. Every time they decry our wages and benefits and pensions as the cause of their economic crisis, when they know goddamn well the reason why the system is in crisis is $43 billion plus interest in bond debt to a bunch of Wall Street parasites who don't pay any taxes in this city, state, or country, because of the complicity of people like Eric Adams, Kathy Hochul, and Joe Biden, and Donald Trump, and all the rest of them. They want to manipulate our fears, and they manipulate the sense of anxiety, fear, and abandonment that working class people feel, in order to weaponize our anxiety and our fear to go back to the good old days. And what they want in the good old days is stop and frisk, racial profiling. Police can do whatever they want. Nobody says anything about it. And, we treat people as heroes who brutalize us. They want us to go back to this kind of traumatic kind of relationship that we have, both with our employers and with the NYPD. Like, we're trauma bonded with our enemies. We're trauma bonded with people who hate us. And people who have always been dog shit at their jobs. Okay, let's not kid ourselves. The police department is terrible at solving crimes, stopping crime. It's not what they do. It's not what their real role is in society. What their real role is in society is as the armed physical force of the state to maintain the current conditions of life in society. It's not that this is like an oversight, or they didn't know that we needed protection, or there wasn't enough resources to protect us. The NYPD budget is something like $11 billion a year. But yet, they can't create an environment where they're at the very least visible in the stations as somewhat of a deterrent of crime. No, we all see them. We all see what they're really doing. What they're doing is being on their cell phone, on Instagram, sleeping in our crew rooms, hiding out, and this is not an accident. They want to make it seem like they can't do anything because people criticize them. That's a bunch of bullshit, and we all know it's bullshit. And this kind of false narrative is actually being parroted by our own leadership. And for example, what the union leadership did, which I think is unforgivable, is they put the picture of that slash wound that this conductor received. They went to the hospital and took pictures of that to publicize that everywhere in the media, because they were going by the media's modus operandi, which is if it bleeds, it leads. If it's sensational, we'll cover it. If it's not, fuck you, right? If it's not sensational, and then we can't make money off of sensationalizing a tragedy we don't give a shit about, then we're not going to cover it. We're not going to give it the coverage that it deserves. So the union, being pragmatic as they are, they go ham on getting the most sensational pictures they can of this person who was victimized, of a coworker who was victimized and abandoned, and they help to splash it all over the media as if that's the way we're going to get the things that we need. That's victim porn. That's re-victimizing the victim, and that's not the way we're going to get respect. We get respect when we demand respect. We get respect when we shut shit down in response to a lack of respect for our lives. And that was happening. On the day this happened, there was mass safety enforcement in the field. And whatever union officers did to facilitate that and support that was what they should be doing. But less than a couple of hours later, you have the head of the MTA, Davey, coming out saying the union made a promise that it wouldn't happen again. And that it was just a show, a farce that the union created in order to show that they were responding. They wouldn't have been in that position had they held their ground. Had they backed up those workers and explained why every member needed to be part of shutting down unsafe work. That unless they can prove that it's safe, unless they take action to make it safe, that we're not going to continue to work in those conditions. That should have been the response. And it should have continued indefinitely until we got the kind of response that is necessary, that actually respects the life of our coworker and actually provides safe working conditions. We, the working class, have to be the ones that lead that. Eric, go ahead. I'm sorry. I had to give a little bit of a framing of what happened.
No, finish what you're saying. I wanted to.
No, I was finished. Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
I would not be surprised if that person that up the conductor was one of their people, or the either the union people or the MTA. Because
I don't believe that, Eric.
You don't believe that?
No, I think
because well, let me tell you why I say that. Let me tell you why I say that. Because we got our union leadership told us that New York Union and other unions that have rail are looking at this incident as a reason to justify one person.
To justify one person train operation?
Yeah.
Okay.
As backward as that sounds. You know, and one person train operation in Chicago, you still got to stick your head out the window, but you got to look down. You know, and you still can get slapped. But they said, no, we don't want a conductor now. We don't want two-person crews in Chicago, because now that person in the middle of this can be assaulted.
I certainly.
They're saying in New York, they want to get. This is what our president told us. They want to get rid of that in New York because of this attack. Some bull crap. Go ahead.
Right. No. I definitely agree that the union leadership is foolish when they don't take action to demand respect and to demand safe work, because it does pave the path eventually for the MTA to come and say, oh, they care about these kind of assaults, and here's a way we can keep people safe. I'm sure the MTA would love to do that, and they have been trying to do that for the longest time. And they were successful in Chicago, where they haven't been successful in New York. I have no doubt that they would want that. And I think that the union leadership's weakness absolutely paves the path all the time for job cuts. They did so with station agents, taking them out of the booth, and there is a clear connection between them taking them out of the booth and setting them up for assault. There's no doubt about that. That they, by the union collaborating with management and taking them outside of the booth, they are setting up a job that no one would want to do, because you become a target for assault. That's absolutely the case. But as far as this individual is a symptom of a society in total collapse. This individual is a symptom of, somebody who needed to be institutionalized, needs to be separated from society to protect themselves and to protect society as a whole. In New York, I'm sure this is mirrored in Chicago. The subway system is the dumping ground for all the problems of society. Okay, so you have a revolving door at mental health, drug and alcohol rehab clinics, a lack of homeless services, a lack of any kind of social work intervention, and the only solution is an armed military intervention, which is the police force. That should be a last resort. That should be an emergency response to problems that just can't be solved with other kinds of intervention. But the subway system is dangerous. In terms of crime, overall crime statistics in New York are down. Violent crime is down, and they have been since about 2021. There was an increase because of COVID, and the lack of a societal response to COVID led to a lot of crime. And a lot of that crime is driven by poverty. A lot of it is driven by the psychological impacts of COVID. But in the subway system, crime has been up for a long time, and crime is a very real situation in the subway, and it's because of the lack of societal response and the abandonment and the retaliation of the NYPD against those who are standing up against their racism in the Black Lives Matter protests. And they've basically been on a blue flu and a strike for the past 3 years. And that leads to a greater sense of abandonment and a greater sense of social disorder that leads to these kind of events happening. So so that individual is a symptom of what's been going on in the subways for a long time. And I'm sure this is mirrored in transportation systems throughout the city, throughout the country, and the world.
It's all the same. It's all the same here in Chicago. Everything you said in New York is going on here.
Yeah.
The same thing. And our union leadership, their solution is not two-person crew. It's to put more workers in the control center watching video cameras.
Oh my God.
So they're going to have them watching video camera, and they're going to call the police. They're going to do something so that it's not video of watching us, right? The workers.
Yeah.
But they're going to be watching the bad guy. And we're going to stop.
So they're going to be rent-a-cops, basically, right?
Yeah. We're going to be a level layer. This is the solution. When it's proven, then when you have uniformed employees of the transit present on the rail car, there's less trouble. Yeah, you're still going to have trouble. You still might have a threat. Okay? Like this man that did this for Conductor. Okay? But when you have people, it always happens. I don't understand. It's amazing. The union leadership in Chicago does not want two-person crew.
That's crazy.
They don't want it.
Well, they had already given it up, right? They're responsible for two-person.
They're responsible. Absolutely. And the operators are dying out. We got 1 to 6 minute delays with moving emergencies, doors full. We got 1 to 3 minute delays with questions by riders, motor cab window. We have gap filler deployment. We have workers on the track with or without flag. We got operators that operate right. They got to pay foremen, because the CTA doesn't want to put foremen on to the interlocking the terminals 24 hours. We got to make special announcements from bulletins. We got people throwing stuff on and on. You got one person doing this. And they still got to stick their head out the window. So they still going to get slashed if the slasher wants to come back.
Right. Well, I mean, I think that like I don't think that it's deliberate, that they it's some kind of like set up, but I do think that the weakness of our union leadership and inability to find their ass when it comes with both hands when it comes to the class struggle, their inability to provide an alternative narrative that actually represents respect for working class lives and the essential role that we as workers play certainly sets us up for all of these attacks. And I don't think portraying ourselves as victims, as meek and mild victims who are just being assaulted, is a way to change any of that. Like John Samuelson, the international president of TWU, when he, as the international president, said that, well, we're going to be assaulted, but if we're going to face these assaults, you have to pay us. And this kind of weak-kneed, cowardly response, that we just accept that we're just going to be punching bags for anybody and everybody who wants to strike out against the lack of care that society has for their lives, that we're just the sacrificial lambs for that, is just insanity. And I'm all for hazard pay for the hazardous conditions we face, but hazard pay as a punishment for the employer for refusing to take action to make these jobs safer. It's just like overtime. Overtime is supposed to be a punishment for employers to punish them for not hiring enough employees and to give them an incentive to do so. They're never going to have an incentive to do so if the union says, okay, well, we know we're going to be assaulted, but you got to give us a few crumbs to make it worth our while.
Yep.
That's insanity.
It's cynical.
And
It's
that
insulting.
and that basically it makes other workers not have sympathy with us when they should, when they would ordinarily have sympathy with us. It makes it look like, we're just in it for, what we can get, whatever we can get in terms of crumbs off the boss's table, and it doesn't provide a united front with all workers who face these conditions. Like, we need to be uniting with the riding public. We need to be uniting with other workers who have to ride these subways to and from work. It's not okay for us. It's not okay for them. And the only way to make it safe is to show that there will be consequences for inaction. And look, I don't believe any of these politicians. I don't think any of them are for us. Most of them are ruling class shits who took money from our enemies and push an agenda that consciously and openly hates us. But we have to make demands on whoever is the elected leadership in society and let them know that there are consequences for their inaction.
And we got to know, too, we'll never have enough money to bribe the corporation.
Yeah, we're never going to be able to compete with the corporations. We're never going to be able to compete in terms of money, in terms of lobbying and political action committees. We're never going to be able to outraise the amount that these people have, because they have insane amounts of disposable income at their disposal. The only thing that we have and the only thing that workers have is our ability to struggle on numbers and the ability to collectively inflict our will upon bosses who don't give a shit about us.
Yep.
And
like a real union.
Yeah, and if you want an attitude adjustment by the NYPD and the mayor and the governor and our MTA bosses, attitude adjustments come with action. And it comes with action that is not for a couple of hours, it's indefinitely until we get what we want.
And we have to include the workers. I can't emphasize enough. As an elected leader in my union, it is wrong for me and other elected people to come up with solutions and not include the workers who are in these jobs. They have to be a part of those solutions. They have to decide, not me.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the whole point of taking action is to try to provide a platform for workers' voices to be heard. I mean, no union leader should be negotiating behind our backs anyway. They should never be telling us they have the solutions. They should be saying, this is what management offered, this was our response, what do you think? What do workers think about what these solutions to these problems are? And they're never and they always put it in the perspective that, well, what can we do? Our interest and their interests are counterposed and they don't want to do it. There's never the question of, well, how do we force them to do it? That never even crosses their mind that I don't give a fuck what you think. I do not care what you think is reasonable, what you don't think is reasonable. I'm going to cripple you until I get an action that represents real respect for our lives.
That's it.
And how many, I mean, when you get in the position where you're like, oh, well, you don't want to agree. Well, so how many months can you go with mass safety enforcement where we bring your service to a crawl and meaningfully communicate to you exactly who runs this railroad? How many months can you live without subway service?
Hey, John, and on that, we're going to wrap it up. And come back. Can we come back to the next episode?
Yeah.
Pick up on this?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, Eric's schedule is a little tight, so he's got to get going soon. But in any case, I want to thank everyone who joined us. If you watch the video, please share the video, like the video, comment on it, so that other workers can continue the discussion. We're going to be back every week to discuss these things. But we want to provide a forum where every week workers know there's a place where their voices can be heard. We want to take calls, and we want to try to make it a much more two-way conversation. And we look forward to talking with you soon. Also, one thing that I want to make sure to share before we go is there is a rally coming up this week that workers should be, if they are available, coming out to. And the reason why it's important that we come out to these rallies is that it matters that the rank and file is mobilizing to demand that their voices be heard. It matters that the only action going on in our union that's bringing it to the doorstep of the governor, like this rally will end at the governor's office in Manhattan on the east side between 40th and 41st Streets. It's starting at Mike Quill Depot on 40th Street and 11th Avenue. It's on Friday, March 8th at 4 p.m. is the start. And in any case, whether or not you agree with the people who are organizing it, whether or not you think they have all the answers, it's a step forward. It's a step in the right direction to have workers' voices heard. Be there. Have your voices heard. Share out the flyer. If you can't make it, many other workers can make it. We know we are on a 24/7 service, and some people won't be able to make it. But do what you can to support this struggle. Also, I'm going to put in the comments. They're raising money for the conductor that was brutally injured in this slashing, and it's very important that our voices not only be heard in what we say, but also in concrete actions to be there for our brother in the time of need, and to make sure that he's good, and that any victim of assault down here is good, regardless of whether our union leadership wants to fight to demand that the people responsible for these problems pay for it. We need to be there for each other, and that increases the morale that we have here down here. People say the morale sucks. Morale sucks because there's no struggle. The morale sucks because there's no direction for our class, because we don't have institutions that speak in our name and actually show strength, and that's why we feel so weak. So every step we can take in the direction of actually showing our strength and showing our unity and solidarity is important. We thank you so much for your time, Eric. I know you got to go. We'll see you soon.
Thanks, everyone. See you next week.
Talk to you guys next week.
Bye-bye.